First, I have to tell you a story. Before I tell you some stories, I have to tell you a story. That's how I roll.
I know it,
Uh,
and I like it.
Lapo Fanti.
What?
Lapo Fanti. Isn't that a great name? Lapo Fanti just turned 13 years old. Lapo Fanti is the son of Sarah Tarenzi. You know Sarah Tarenzi? You have to do your hand like this. You say Tarenzi. Last week, 9:30, we had a ritual event here, as we do 8 times a year, although we're having to skip one in September because people will be out of town. But anyway, it's from the Wiccan practice, and it honors the turning of the wheel of the year. And there are 3 harvest festivals, and we observed the first of these 3 last week. It's called Lammas or Lunasad. And we sat in a circle, and we sang some songs, and with Pastor, we anointed each other with some aromatic ointments. And every time we do one of these, and we've done them since summer of last year, they add a little more. Natalie and her husband Joe, they add a little more to these rituals. And so last week, they had us out in the field in recognition of the games that take place in Ireland and have since long before the Greek Olympics. And we stood in 2 lines and we kicked a soccer ball back and forth. And it was just kind of to check in with that ancient energy, you know. And so, at the end of that, we had the 11 o'clock service, which many of you came to. It looked more or less like it usually does. And as Natalie and Joe were getting ready to leave, she says to him, why don't you lose the soccer ball? Because he just got it someplace and brought it in. And she said, why don't you give it to somebody so we don't have to carry it home? And he turns around. Now, Joe is new to us in this community, okay? And Sarah's son doesn't attend a whole lot. And Joe turns around, and there's Sarah's son. He says, would you like this soccer ball? Hands it to him. Kid's like, cool. What he didn't know was it was his birthday week. And he'd asked his mom for a soccer ball.
Oh my God.
And she got him a guitar capo instead because he'd asked her for that before. And so she's emailing me last Sunday afternoon, and so is Natalie, saying, can this kid manifest or what? So that's the thing. How about having it be that easy? Somebody just says, here, you want this? A total stranger. Here, you want this? I'm not using it right now. That's kind of what we're here to learn, that and more. And we're working through the inner healing experience. Now, here's another weird synchronicity. So we're working through the inner healing experience. I had a phone call here at my desk phone from a woman who attended this place 25 years ago, who's since moved away, this week, asking me, could I email her a copy of the inner healing experience? She didn't know we were doing a series on it, but she'd been reading it around the house, and she'd misplaced her copy. How cool is that? You have it in your program. It's page 2 in there. You don't have to look at it right now. There's no test or anything. It's a body of work drawn from Jack Boland. I explained all about last week how it came to be and who he was and all that, so you can get the CD if you're interested. But it's well, you just went through it. It was the thing with your hand on your heart. We say things to ourselves, and then we say things to our imagination, and then we say things to each other. And it takes us through these different stages of acceptance and willingness and openness and trust and surrender, which new practitioner Jim Cantor will carry you through this Wednesday night, and I hope you'll join him for that, because he's got an amazing presentation put together. He sent me also really organized time down to the 2nd, which is, that's new territory for us here at Usually it's kind of like fits into, you know, and you got it, boom. And anyway, Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, come hear Jim do this. But today, just to cover a couple of pieces of this and make them practical, and also tie them in with a cultural touchstone for some of us of a certain age. There is a presence and a principle. The presence is what is, and the principle is what it does. The presence is, if you will, God or higher power or spirit or source, whatever you want to call it. Then there's the activity of that. And the activity of that is creation. But it's a participatory creation. It's creating stuff, but it requires input from its creatures, from its creations, who act as co-creators with it. That is to say, sentient beings. Now, I don't know how much the walls and the furniture have to play in it, but I do know that people do have a big role to play in it. I believe animals do too. I believe sentient beings, like it says, you know. And sentience is iffy, because more things may be sentient than we suppose, and that's a whole other conversation. But we know we are. I can feel the presence of God in my life or not. It's up to me. I can be open to it, close down to it, or vacillate between the two. It's up to me. So it requires this presence and the operation of this presence as principle. It requires our meeting it halfway in our lives, in our minds, in the activity of our thought, in the activity of our feeling. And when you take thought and you wrap it in feeling, you have belief. If you want to know more about that, we have a class coming up called Heartfelt Living on Saturday, starting the end of this month. The short version of it is, you take a thought, you wrap it in feeling, now you have a package of energy, a dynamo of energy, because thought by itself won't necessarily create. You know that by now. I know that by now. I sit there and think stuff, and it doesn't necessarily happen. Feeling by itself won't create. Actually, it does kind of create, but it's like finger painting. It's sort of a messy method, you know, unless directed, unless channeled in some way. But you put the two together, thought and feeling, and that's where real creation happens. I mean, something tangible and something permanent, or as permanent as creations could be, and that's another conversation. Because actually, once everything is created, it begins to disintegrate back into pure potential, and that's not a bad thing. It's like the seasons, it's like the tides, it's like nature. It just begins to recycle itself in some way. But meanwhile, in the midst of that process, here I am thinking, here I am feeling, putting the two together as belief and manifesting a certain thing. There is a power and a presence right where you are, and it's sensitive and responsive. This is what the material says too. It's sensitive and responsive to your every thought, to your every impulse, to your every feeling. It doesn't change everything based on each thought, but they form patterns. And it takes this into account. You have an explanatory style, you have a certain attitude, a certain position you take relative to life. And this principle operates on that. The more feeling behind it, the more it really manifests in vivid kinds of ways for you. To know that this power is there. And like I said in the opening about willful naivete, realize that this power is operative even when it doesn't appear to be. And don't get hung up on the details. People will say, well, it doesn't seem like anything's happening. There are a million metaphors for this, but one of my favorites is like growing things in the garden, you know, harvest time coming up. Well, everything being harvested had to be planted, or it planted itself. The stuff does that, you know, birds drop it and all, and boom, there it is. And then it starts to grow. But if you're growing something deliberately, it's fact of nature, I didn't know it's not a word. Well, you're growing something deliberately. You put it in you put the seed in the soil, and then comes a little sprout, thing germinates, a little bitty sprout. You pull it up, yank it up. How you doing? How you doing? What have you done? You pulled it out of its creative element. You've stunted it. If you haven't stopped it altogether, you've certainly slowed it down. Another example, somebody else came up with, but I copped onto it a long time ago, is when you open the washing machine lid, everything stops. And it all kind of looks up, you know how it's all kind of clumped together, and it all sort of looks up at you. Some of it kind of falls off, and then you put the lid down, and it's back to business every time you, and that's a safety thing, right? But it's how spiritual law works too. You interrupt this. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? and it seizes up. There's got to be a matter of trust. And we have to overlook certain things, like the tendency that we have, which is a learned thing, it's not genetic, to compare ourselves to other people. And I get this sometimes from new people, and the last thing I want to do is make new people wrong. You learn that in ministry school pretty much the first week. Just don't shame new people for not knowing what you're about to tell them, you know? It's like, that's kind of crazy, right? But new people do this well, if it's all that, if I can manifest my dreams and stuff, I know somebody who didn't. And they, what about this wretched soul over here who's not done? Nobody knows anybody else's process. That's why what you want to have is compassion. Leave comparison out of it altogether. All you want to have is compassion for someone who appears to be suffering. They may not even, and that's another thing, they may not be suffering. It may just look to you like they should be suffering. Because if you were where they were, you think you'd be suffering, you know? But maybe they're not suffering, and give them a chance to tell you that. But if they are suffering, don't get all up in your judgment about what they did wrong that created that for themselves. Just give them some love. More on that momentarily. So we learn to overlook separation where it appears. And on your news feeds and all, you get a lot of separation thrown at you, a lot of division. We're told relentlessly how divided the culture is, how divided the culture is. I'll tell you something. Here's part of my naivete. Not where I come to work every day. Not where I come to work. Look at you. We love each other. We all vote for who we vote for and feel how we feel, but we come together here and we're a family. It's a beautiful thing. We can create that in permanence, just as it has occurred in transience sometimes through the culture. So we have an idealized view of life in this teaching. An ideal that says there's one life, and that life was our source, and that life's all the life there is, no matter how it appears. And knowing that, practically speaking, you can do certain things that might not have occurred to you that you needed to do, or that circumstances seem to dictate. You know, you can rise to the occasion in new and different ways. There's a radio station in Philadelphia that this week is going to have a special body of programming. On Thursday afternoon, they're going to begin playing something that's going to run all the way through Monday morning. And it is the entire 1969 Woodstock Festival. Every minute of it, every second of it, every band that played, all the downtime between the bands, the stage announcements, and probably some stretches of just silence, although people played 24/7. And we're commemorating that 50 years ago this month, and to my generation, it's a big deal. And if you're not of my generation, you're probably really fed up with hearing about it. Because my generation's been talking about it for 50 years. But if you'll indulge me, I got just a little bit more on it for you. You might find kind of useful. There are ways that people come together suddenly, seemingly spontaneously, to an event such as that was. It was supposed to be commercial, and the promoters of it hoped to make money. Well, that didn't happen. And the fences got trampled, and you can see in the film, I mean, people just stepped all over chain link fences, and in came somewhere between 300,000 to 500,000 members of my generation for these 3 days of peace and music there in Bethel, New York, which is near Woodstock, but is 30 miles away, I think, up in the rolling hills, farmland, beautiful countryside. And then it rained, and it got real muddy, and everybody's cars got stuck. It was a real mess, and people couldn't get out of there and all. But they had a blast, and somebody filmed it, and the film came out a year later, and it brought to all the millions who weren't able to be there kind of the vibe of what went on. I was 13 and a half that summer. I couldn't get there. I would have if I could have, but I couldn't find somebody to drive me there, and it jumped up quick, and it just didn't come together, but I was there in spirit. Well, certain things happened there that I want to bring up today on account of the anniversary of it, that I think would be useful for you and me. One, think of a time when you've had something that you wanted to do creatively, and you were stifled, or you were limited, or they told you couldn't do it, or maybe that's a problem that you've kind of overcome already. You're accustomed to that. It makes sense having that kind of problem. What if? Well, let me use these two down here as an example, who are two of the three who put on our shows for us. All right? You guys take an hour and a half, 2 hours for a show with an intermission and stuff. What if a little voice came out of the room back here and said, do another hour? Well, that happened to Richie Havens. Richie Havens was the first performer at Woodstock. He was supposed to go on, I think at noon on Thursday, and he went on at 3 or 4 on Thursday afternoon because they had technical problems with the sound. It hadn't even started raining yet, but with the sound and the light towers and all of this, and he goes on. And then he starts to play. Most of the sets at Woodstock were 45 minutes to an hour. Richie Havens is out there playing, and they're telling him from backstage, the band after you can't get here. The band after them can't get here. Play more stuff, Richie. 3 hours Richie played. He played every song he knew. I'm not making that up. He told every song he knew. And the last song he did in his set, when they finally let the man stop, was a song called Freedom. And if you've seen the D.A. Pennebaker documentary movie, or you have the album, or you care at all about what happened at Woodstock, you know that's featured in the movie, and it's a beautiful and powerful thing. He was older than most of the other performers and most of the kids there at the time, and he's sitting on a stool, and he's playing his guitar, and he's singing this song called Freedom. And it's about freedom, and it's about empowerment. And here's an African-American guy in 1969 sitting on a stage in front of 500,000 almost all white kids playing this song, and it changed things. And I can tell you, as a member of that generation, it changed things. It was like an opening into a different world, into a different culture, and it was an invitation to join in a process of greater freedom, to embark on this. Many were already involved in that process, but when you're a little kid, it was like, whoa, this was powerful. What I didn't know until recently was he made up that song on the spot. Because he'd run out of stuff he knew. And so he started playing chords, and he got into a cadence like a Negro spiritual. And he came up with these words, and he just did this thing. And the power of the song wasn't carried lyrically as much as it was the passion of the guitar playing and the repetition of the word freedom and so on. Well, I don't know that it would have had that much power, or he would have come up with something like this if he'd stuck to the plan, if he'd had the 45 minutes. Sometimes when everything works out right, it doesn't work out right. It should go haywire. It should go a little bit sideways, for things to really flow, right? And you don't know what you're going to say or what you're going to do, but something does. And this is our mantra around here. I don't know the answer, but there is something that does know, and I'll go talk to that. When you're out there on the stage, well, it talks through you. So just realize that sometimes use that willful naivete. So, this is God, I've got to freak out. I don't know how I'm going to handle this. Well, there's something working through me that is going to handle this. And it's going to create magic and beauty and wonder that's going to transform the experience of people. Decades from now, generations from now. And then there's the matter of, so that's if you have too much space, you have to fill. But there's a form of limitation too that can occur. And lately it's been called, have you heard of FOMO, F-O-M-O? It stands for the fear of missing out. This is a big deal now. The fear of missing out. There's a party going on, and I'm not invited. There's something wonderful happening, and I can't, And what are you going to do? Well, you collapse space and time, and you realize it's not over there. It's ubiquitous. It's happening right where you are. Everything, if the universe is one whole system, then it's centered at every point within itself. It's a circle whose center is nowhere, or whose circumference is nowhere, and whose center is everywhere. I get that backward all the time. The center is everywhere, and you're that center. You're part of that center, and the circumference doesn't exist, because obviously then it wouldn't be an infinite system if it had a circumference. So it's happening all at once, and you can trust it. You're invited. You'll be included in some way. So, Woodstock. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. You've heard of them? Crosby, there's a documentary out about him. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young were represented by the David Geffen organization. And his partner, whose name I forget, who recently passed, but Geffen is now a very big deal in the arts generally. In fact, they just renamed one of the theaters at Lincoln Center for him because of the donation that he made. But back in the day, 50 years ago, he was a talent agent, booking agent, manager, to these rock and roll people and scruffy rock and roll people who were irresponsible and kind of had substance abuse issues and things going on as well. He's herding cats, So to get to Woodstock, they're flying people in and out on helicopters because the New York State Thruway is closed, and all the cars have just been abandoned. People just walked off and left stuff, and the artists and all are having food, which I'll get to in a minute. Well, Geffen puts Crosby, Stills, Nash, and they brought in Young at the last minute to join them. He puts them on a helicopter, and along with this other client of his, who's dating one of them, and her name's Joni Mitchell. Joni Mitchell's about to get on the helicopter and go off to Woodstock, and Geffen pulls her aside. He says, words to the effect of, and if you're fact-checking, this is an approximation, okay? Words to the effect of, this is their scene, not yours. He says to Joni Mitchell, says Geffen, for you, I have something better in mind. Tomorrow night, you're going to go on the Dick Cavett show. You're going to go on the Dick Cavett show, and he'll interview you, and you'll sing a couple of songs, and millions of people will see you, and it'll make your career. So let them go be hippies up there in this thing in New York, and you do this. So that's how it played out. She went on the Cavett show the next night, which no one watched. And Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young played Sweet Judy Blue Eyes and made them instantly famous. Maybe she saw this coming, or maybe she didn't, but that night, the night before she goes on Cavett, she's sitting in a hotel room in New York. It's raining. It started to rain. It's going to rain more upstate and flood out, the festival. She's sitting alone in a hotel room, watching on black and white TV as thousands of members of her generation stream to this thing that she's not going to. And she feels sad about that, and she feels wistful about that, and she tries to put herself in their shoes and imagine what they're feeling, and out comes a song. And you're going to hear that song in a few minutes. Out comes a song that defined for many people what it was all about, that we are stardust, and that we are golden, and that we are, million-year-old carbon, billion-year-old carbon, trillion, I don't know, old carbon. We're old carbon, really old carbon. Not carbon paper, that would be even older, but we're really old carbon. And she got it off the TV, the vibe of this thing. Your best days are not past you, and they're not happening somewhere else to someone else. That's what I'm trying to say here. Your big creative dream will not be denied. You cannot be at the airport when your ship comes in. It's just not possible. Somehow or other you will cross paths with it, but it may not be on your schedule. may not be. I don't want to suggest, there's a school of thought that says God laughs at plans. And I don't want to go there. Because to me that's real negative and limiting, you know, and it's like there's this power that just wants to mess with us. But sometimes plans do get derailed, but not the outcome. If you're committed. And Joni Mitchell as an artist was committed to being a voice for change, for transformation of the culture. And so she got her opportunity. So just like her, you can't miss the helicopter. You can't be at the TV studio when you ought to be on stage at the festival. And then the best story of all, to me, I think, is this about a hero of mine who exemplified the Woodstock spirit, which I realize has been cartooned a lot. People are like, they were all on drugs and messed up generation things. But we came together and people, you know, they dropped sandwiches out of helicopters and people broke them in half and shared them with the person next to them. You don't find that in a lot of places like that, you know? There wasn't a lot of diving in for, that's mine, give me that. It was more of a communal kind of spirit. But they ran out of food. They brought in as much as they could, and they ran out of food. And there was a group of people there who made it their business to make soup, like the old story about stone soup, you know? You throw something in a pot and you boil it up, and they had water from somewhere out of the creek, I don't know. And people got fed soup or stew or some kind of glop. So you can see still photos of this. They're doling this stuff out on plates, you know? And it fed people with it. It was a group called the Hog Farm Commune out of the Southwest, and another group called the Diggers from San Francisco that had been a free food pantry for some years before that. Both groups, by the way, exist to this very day. And the head of the Hog Farm Commune was a guy named Hugh Romney, but B.B. King, the guitarist, had given Hugh Romney a different name. He says, you're everywhere, and it's always about food, and it's always about service, and it's like, you know, you're just taking care of people. And he called him Wavy Gravy. He gave him that name. And so if you've heard of Wavy Gravy, that's who. Wavy Gravy, now 83 years old, living in Austin, Texas, is still doing what Wavy Gravy's done the whole time, about feeding people and taking care of people and creating initiatives like Camp Win a Rainbow and the Sheva Foundation and different things that do good in the world. He is a beneficial presence, and he encourages others to be a beneficial presence. That most exemplified the spirit right there, is just feeding people and feeding people and feeding people, because whatever else they might need, you can help with that. You don't need credentials. There's no comparison. There's no vetting that has to take place. There's only one question. Are you hungry? Are you hungry? And if you're hungry, I'll find something for you. And if I can't find it, I'll find somebody who can find it, and somehow or other we'll pull it together. Well, right here in this area, there's a group of people who've lived for over 100 years in a community that's been isolated by fear, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and basically just bad energy. We can heal that. We can help heal that. These people are food challenged. Their kids are food challenged. And next Saturday morning, we're feeding them again. And I would like to see each and every one of you there. Take 4 hours out of your day, 7 to 11 a.m. Danielle has a clipboard back here if you'd sign up. If you can't lift stuff, don't worry. We have other things for you to do. We'll have bottled water for you. We'll have sunscreen for you. We'll do everything. We'll come to your house and pick you up. And if you need that, we could probably put that together too. We will give out around 13,000 pounds of food to around 200 families. These are people who range from being disabled and unable to work to people who hold 3 jobs and still can't put enough food on the table. people who weep with gratitude, and I can tell you that for a fact, because they did at the first of these events that we had in May. We're doing them quarterly now. The next one is next weekend, and we have November just before Thanksgiving, and we have February, and then we have every 3 months for the rest of our lives that we'll be doing this. It costs, by the way, all the princely sum of $200 from your center. We've got the next 3 or 4 of these things paid for in advance. $200, and that just pays like fuel costs and stuff on the trucks moving the food over there. All the rest of it is donated by HEB and so on through the food bank. And all we have to do is just physically dispense it to people. But you know what we do, just like they did at Woodstock, man, and just like anyone who is in any kind of service, just like we do with the blood drives. We don't just hand them food, we give them love. We give them love. We say, this is for you. So, on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of this thing that happened back in the day, just a month after the moon landing did, it was quite a year in 1969. I remember it, not like it was yesterday, but I remember it. And I was there as a kid. It was fun and exciting. And what I mostly remember is how I felt at the time, and that's how I choose to feel today at 63, going on 64, is that anything is possible. There is magic everywhere. That's how I choose to live my life, and I invite you to do the same. Because it doesn't know how old you are. Because it has no edges, this source. It has no time to it. It just knows use the infinite experience of itself, experience that it is having in this world by means of you. So let's know together now, there is one life, one power, one presence, pure spirit, radiant energy happening all the time, everywhere, happening through me, through you right now. This one is mighty to heal, to transform, to uplift, to overcome and transcend. This one knows no limitations, no time, no space, sees it all as happening right now, and contains within it everything necessary for the fulfillment of every dream anybody might have. Meaning, if all of us together, all at one time, I mean all of us on this earth, all at one time, all dreamt up the same thing, said I want the same thing, said I want a soccer ball, said I want a guitar capo, this one would still deliver. Out of the everywhere into the here. There is no demand that can be made on this one that it is not prepared to fulfill. Just know that it is a reciprocal relationship. And if you ask for the capo, then you get to learn the guitar. You get the soccer ball. Then you get to stretch yourself and get some exercise kicking the thing around. If we ask for bread, it will not give us a stone. And maybe sometimes it won't even give us a fully cooked loaf. It'll give us ingredients and a kitchen and say, have at it. Because in the process of assembling these things is where our growth is found, our self-discovery, our coming home to ourselves. I love this life, and I trust the process of this life to do that which ought to be done, and myself in this life to do what ought to be done by me, to be guided, not pushed, just gently steered in the direction of the dreams that I have long ago declared for myself. It is as simple as that. For this knowing and its manifestation in form everywhere I turn, I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is.
So it is.